So that's how I would do it. So now let's talk about what we're going to do at the machine. So the first thing we'll do before we take it to the machine is get rid of these fill stitches. They were just here for us to make things easier to see so we wouldn't get confused. So we'll bring this green one back here. I'm going to delete it anyways. Now the fill stitches are easy to find because they're right before each of these orange placement stitches. Okay. So now this green one is the cross here. Let me right click, separate color. Okay. So this one here, we'll right click, delete color. That's this right here, the first one. Delete color. Okay. So that one's gone. And then placement blanket. Here, this green one, right click, delete color. The next one before the orange is the pink, right click, delete color. And the green one is before the orange. And you could do this so many other ways. I could have separated all colors and then selected them all the fills by holding control and then hitting delete. So I'm just doing it this way because it's easier for you to see. Well, maybe, maybe not, but you know, whatever's before the orange is what we delete. So the last one, right click, delete color. And I guess I will separate these just so you could see them. So right click on one of the color blocks and separate all colors. Okay, so the only thing we have now is our crosshair and our placement stitches and our blanket stitches. And that's it. And, you know, these orange placement stitches will be taken out as we go. So as we stitch our first one, place our fabric down and stitch the blanket stitch. When we're done stitching the blanket stitch, we're going to remove this. That's why we don't want any ties on these, because you don't want to disturb your hoop. Okay. And we also, when we're done stitching this, we want to bury our jump threads, or at least move them out of the way for the next round. You know, they won't have any ties on them. I hope I didn't say jump, I meant ties. The placement stitches have no ties, and these jump lines have no ties. So as you go, we're going to be burying these jump lines or getting them out of the way, and we're going to be picking out, you know, our placement stitches as we go. So the first thing you'll do is you have your cut file already. That was that SVG that we made, and you could take that to your brother's Scan and Cut. It will take an SVG or an FCM, but our SVG is perfect because it's a vector, a pure vector. It was smooth. We edited it in Studio. And remember, when we were in Studio, I decided that my cut file would be only 1 millimeter expanded from the blanket stitch instead of, like, I think I did it 1.5 or 2. I can't remember. But it turned out better to just be a 1 millimeter expand for this particular design and everything, you know. So keep that in mind. And remember, 1 millimeter expand in Studio means that it's a 1/2 mil beyond each edge. In Editor, it's not like that. If I want a 1/2 mil on each edge in Editor, then I just, I do insert, effect, inflate, contour. Okay, I inflate it a 1/2 mil, not 1 mil. So that's the difference between Studio and Editor. But we did everything in Studio. So at any rate, so let's get back to, so you have your cut file all ready. You're going to, on your fabric, on each of your fabrics, you know, your pink fabric, your yellow fabric, and so on, all of these fabrics, you're going to want to put Heat and Bond Light on the back of them. And then put that fabric on your fabric mat, you know, whether it's a Cricut Maker or Brothers Scan and Cut. And they tell you to mirror your design, you know, your fabric with your Heat and Bond Light adhered to it. I take the paper off, turn it so that the fabric is touching the mat. It just works better. It's easier to pull up, because then when you pull it up, you don't stretch out your fabric. Okay, so that's why they tell you to mirror it before you cut it. Now these are all pretty symmetrical, but still the way that, you know, how this has to be so perfect, I would go ahead and mirror each one when you're in your software, and then flip it around for your scan and cut so that the fabric is touching the mat, not the Heat and Bond Light. So you'll cut out all of your pieces, okay? And then the way that I hoop, you'll see the way that I hoop. You can look at some of my videos, my quilting videos, and there might be one on my YouTube channel. WeQuilt Studio is my YouTube channel, and I have a playlist for quilting in the hoop, and there should be some applique in there. But the way I do it, I quilted it first, and then I just did the applique on top of the quilted quilt because I have a long arm. But you can do it either way. If you're going to quilt around this, after the applique, you're going to go and quilt around it. It's just harder. You know, you have to echo around it and everything. And if you don't have a long arm, it's just hard. So you might want to do it the way I did it, even if you don't have a long arm. Just quilt the whole quilt and then put on your applique. So if you get to the block or the place where you want to put this, say you want to put it in one of your blocks on your quilt sandwich or quilt on your quilt. I'm going to call it a quilt now, because when I say quilt, I mean the top quilt top, the batting, and the backing. The entire quilt sandwich. So I call that a quilt, and most people do. A quilt is a finished, item. You don't have to have the binding on, of course. So then your quilt is quilted and it's ready for applique. And so say you see a square on your quilt where you want to put this applique. The best thing to do would be to print a template of this as it is here. And you would go to File, Print Template without text is fine. And to be honest, I think it's best to do it in normal. You should see the grid if I say show hoop. So normal, I don't need that. Show hoop, I'm going to uncheck everything. So I just want it to be simple. Just show hoop, normal view. I'm going to print a PDF just so I could see it. Print preview. Okay. So it's print to PDF. I'll click OK. Okay, if this comes up, there's not enough space to print the template in a 1-to-1 scale on a single paper. Number of papers required 2. You say to yourself, well, do you want to print the template on several papers? So you would, if you do, you would click multi, and then you'd have to tape 2 papers together. But if you just want it to see if you can get it to fit on a single paper by changing your paper from portrait to landscape, if you want to try that first, you would hit cancel here. Don't ever hit single, because if you tell them you just want to print it on a single paper, it's going to shrink your design to fit it on a single paper. And I'm probably in portrait mode, so it's going to, shrink it so it fits on a single paper in portrait mode. So don't ever click this. If you want to tape it together, print on several papers, fine, click multi. If you don't, and you want to see if you can fit it on one sheet by just changing to landscape, then hit cancel. And I'm going to hit cancel. And I'm going to hit Control A to select everything, and I'm going to look down at the size. I'm in mils. Let me do options, measure in inches. Okay, 7.35. I should be able to print that on one sheet of paper. Let me zoom to selected. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do File, Print Setup this time. And see how it's on portrait? Try landscape. I'm still in PDF. I'm not even to my printer. Try landscape and hit OK. And then try it again. File, Print template without text. Uncheck, put it in normal. Show hoop is the only thing I need. Print to PDF, print preview, OK. OK. And here we are. So it did work. Now, I can center it if I want. It doesn't really matter, because I'm just going to print it and, use the crosshairs to and whatnot to center on my block. So I'll just leave it like it is. And even though I chose print without text, you can still double click on this, and your file name shows up there. And sometimes I go and I take everything except the size and the name and where it's at and hit delete, and I leave that. I hit OK, and sometimes I'll try and put that somewhere on the page that isn't going to be in my way, like if I put it, I don't really want it on my crosshair. I always wish that I could rotate these. This is just centering the design horizontally or vertically. But sometimes I wish that I could take this and flip it. I mean, yeah, I could have flipped the design and then this wouldn't have been in the way. But I guess I'll just put it up here. That just means when I check for my crosshair, I can't go up as high. When I follow my crosshair, because that's part of my checking for rotation. So, just know that might get in the way up there. I could put it here. That way I can follow my needle all the way up. Maybe I'll do that. Or maybe I just won't use it. I don't know. So, for right now, I think I won't use it. So, let's see, is this one? Yeah, it's the same. So, I don't know if I can get rid of that now. I think the only way I can get rid of it is to just delete it all. Okay. Oh yeah, it's still showing as something over there. I'll just hit cancel and start over. Sorry about that. File, print template without text. Whoops, not show begin, show hoop. So I want to see the grid lines of the hoop. Okay. Okay. We'll just leave nothing on here just so you don't get confused. So none of these are going to show. So I'll click OK. And Hawaiian block, template Hawaiian block. I must have saved it already. Look, see where I put the name of the file there. I'll just call this, I'm just going to save over this one because I've made it differently now. So template Hawaiian block. Okay. So you'd print that out and you'd have the crosshair, you know, showing, and you could fold your design on the crosshair just so that you can get the points of the crosshair, or the easiest way, to be honest, is to just stick a pin through this template, paper template, put it through the center first, and then on your quilt sandwich, on your quilt, draw a crosshair on there with washable pen, or not. You may not have to draw a crosshair. Your block might be, you know, easy enough for you to see where your center is and, you know, how you want to place it and whatnot. So you would just go by the template, in which case you would just tape this template on. But if you did have to draw a crosshair on your fabric, do so in washable, that blue washable pen, or the air erasable purple one. I have both of them. So, but just remember, you can't iron those. Okay? And you don't want to use a friction pen because people have said they come back, you know, when it's cold. So you can match up your crosshairs if you want with a pin in the middle. And then once your pin is in the middle, you can line up your, you know, a pin here and a pin, say, here horizontally. Once you have the center and then you have these two pins done, you know, by sticking a pin through the paper and then the pin through the crosshair on your fabric, you should be fine. You shouldn't have to worry about this line as well. It should line up fine, but you can check it, you know. So then you would pretty much tape this on. I would tape it with painter's tape, you know, your paper template. And if you don't want to see the painter's tape, you can always just, you know, roll it and put it on the back. I don't use double-sided tape on stuff like this because sometimes it's hard to get off the fabric. I do have it on the bottom of my hoops though. So, but it's pretty much worn off a lot. So anyway, so you have your template down. And if you don't want to use the template at all and you just want to draw a crosshair on your fabric, you can do that. You don't even need the template. You know, just draw a crosshair on your fabric. Either way, you have to have a crosshair on your fabric in some manner, either drawn on by itself or have your paper template taped to the fabric, because your paper template has the crosshair on it. So, and once that's on, then you take your plastic grid, your plastic hoop template, you know, that's see-through, and you line up the crosshairs on that plastic template to the crosshair on your fabric. And you kind of, that's where I have double-sided tape. I have double-sided tape on it. And I have two types of plastic templates, and you could see that in my videos. I have one that came with the hoop, and then I have another one that came with another set of hoops that I just bought, an off-market hoop, but it's still made for my Janome MB4. And I bent up the sides of that plastic hoop template so that it would fit into a hoop once everything is hooped. Okay, so you'd have to watch my videos to see the difference between the two. So in this case, I'm hooping the fabric. I'm not floating anything. With a quilt, you just hoop it. There's no stabilizer or nothing. So I'm going to be using my plastic template where I have the sides bent up. So I tape that plastic see-through hoop template to the crosshair that's on the fabric. And that's where I use double-sided tape. I have double-sided tape on the back of that plastic hoop template. Then, once that's down, I slide the bottom ring of the hoop underneath because I have a multi-needle, so it's a little different. If you have a sewing machine combo, it's a little different. But I slide my bottom ring underneath the fabric, the entire quilt, and then I have the quilt laying on a table, a little table by my machine that rolls around, and the hoop is actually laying on top of a steel sheet, a big steel sheet that's bigger than my hoop. And I put magnets down then to hold the fabric where I want. And it's kind of neat the way it works, because then I take my top ring and I'm able to place my top ring on top of the fabric. It'll just nest right in because my plastic hoop template nests into that top ring. And then I could just, push gently on the bottom ring to get it into position. And then I hoop it. But just like always with hooping, you hoop it once, tighten everything, then take it out of the hoop. Because you never want to tighten your screw, while it's hooped. Because then that's how you distort the fabric. So you hoop it, you tighten the ring to get it as tight as you can. Once it's as tight as it can be, pop it out. And then just hoop it again by just pressing. Now, if you have a Magna, what is it called? Mighty Hoop, which I plan on getting one, but I'm kind of frustrated because they have the ability to come up with a 9-inch Mighty Hoop, because they have 9x6 Mighty Hoops. But for the big designs, they're only 8x12. And I talked with them and I asked them, why aren't you making 9x12s? Because if you make a 9x12 Mighty Hoop, then we can use an 8-inch design on it. 7.87-inch tall design on it. But with your 8-inch Mighty Hoop, our designs can only be like 6.87, like 6 3/4 or whatever. And they said, well, that 9x6 was kind of an experiment to see if it would work. We kind of changed the hoop up a little. And since it does work, we might be doing it in the future, but they're not saying for sure, and they won't say when. And I'm kind of frustrated with that. Because they wanted to take my order for the 8x12, and I was like, I don't know. I'd like to wait and see if they'll come through with the 9x12. Because those Mighty Hoops have such big, thick sides that you can only, even though it says it's an 8x12, you can only make it 6 3/4 tall. The width is fine. The width you can still make it, however, 9 my hoop only goes to 9.5 anyways, 9.45. So that would be fine, but the height is what the problem is. And I don't feel like changing all my designs. So I've just been hooping with my method. So anyways, maybe you could talk them into it. And I'm not getting a dime hoop because they don't hold, especially for quilting. They move around, they shift. We're going to be pulling out, stitches here, placement stitches. I mean, they'll be easy to take out, but, you don't want a dime hoop for that. So anyways, so you hoop your fabric and then you put it into the machine. You put your hoop into the machine, and the first thing you do is you bring up your design, and the first thing your design does is it comes to center. We're going to check for two things, and this is for any design. We're going to check for center. Once we get it centered, then we're going to check to see if the design needs to be rotated. So those are the two things. Check for center, check for rotation. So you open up the design. The first thing it does is the needle will go to the center, the true center of the hoop. And of course, we all hoop incorrectly. So say your needle is over here. So then you use the jog buttons on the machine, the actual buttons that show the carriage moving the hoop. Okay? And you jog the machine so that the needle is right here on center. So if the needle was over here on my machine, I use the jog button to the right, and then I use the other jog buttons that go down. Okay. Once you're in the center, now you want to check for rotation. That's when you want to follow the crosshair. So the crosshair is never stitched, you follow it. Now in my machine, I have follow buttons. So I just, they show as FF and RR, So now my crosshair, you can see it here. The vertical leg of it is in blue. My selection color is in blue. And it starts at the bottom. And I always like to start them at the bottom because then you don't have to worry about your needle hitting the back of the hoop if you hooped incorrectly, if you were using an aftermarket hoop. There's all that thickness back here. So I like to start mine down here. And you can see if I have this clicked, okay, and it's 1 through 91, and I could just say 1 through 10, hit enter. Okay, this is highlighted in blue. And if I even hit points editing mode, go into normal view, you could see those are my stitches down there. I don't want to click that one because then they'll all get. So you could see my design is in fact starting down here. If I click outside and then click one of them, it's kind of hard to see. It shows I'm on 6 to 7. If I hit tab, yeah, it's hard to show them being selected. 7 to 8, if I hit shift tab, I keep hitting it, I'm down at 1 to 2. So my crosshair is starting down here. I did that on purpose in Studio. Okay. So at any rate, let's go back to this design and it's saying 1 to 2 now because I still had this selected. Let me select something else, and yeah, it's still showing that. I'll just click that and then bring that into view. So let me go back into 3D so you could see it better. After you check for center, you find somewhere on your machine that allows you to just like follow through stitch by stitch. Every machine has it, and I have some videos on the Brother machine, how to do it. I think I have it on the PR1, and I also have it on the SE600, you know, the combo machines. They're a little different, but they're kind of the same. I don't have the Brothers 600 or 12 needle instructions, but they should be similar to the PRS. And I have the Janome MB4 instructions also. So, but at any rate, you start following, and you follow down. You take your follow buttons and you know, start hitting them, hit them, hit them, hit them, and keep following. And if you first start out with your needle down here to the right of this vertical leg, then you know that when you get up here, your needle's going to be to the left, because you want to think of your following, think of your needle as like a spinner on a game board. So if that spinner is to the right down here, as you follow, it's going to be to the left up here. That means you have to take that spinner and rotate it clockwise. You know, you have to estimate how many degrees. So then you have to go into the edit screen on your machine and rotate your design. Now, some machines, if your needle is over here, it means you have to rotate your design counterclockwise. So you just have to see how your machine interprets rotation. My machine looks at the needle, so it's kind of weird, you know. I'm moving the design clockwise, but when I go to, say I move it 2 degrees clockwise, when I come back now and check it again, you have to start at the beginning. Check it again then to see if you rotated it correctly. Then the needle follows it correctly, straight all the way up. Once you can achieve that, you know, if you didn't achieve it the first time, you have to rotate it back or rotate it more, then check it again. Follow, 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 follow. So once you're set with that, then you're ready to do your placement stitch. Okay? And so you just go ahead then and stitch your placement stitch for your first object. And then you'll have your machine stop. So after each of these items, you know, before you start stitching, you have to put stops after every one. Okay? And at your machine. I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry. So even put it after the crosshair. Just put a stop after every object. Sometimes I do that just because I don't feel like thinking. You know what I mean? So after every color, make sure you put a stop on that object. So you would stitch your placement stitch, the machine would stop, and then you would take your fabric and you would place it down, and I like to dab a little bit of Elmer's washable school glue on the back of my fabric. Even though I have Heat and Bond Light on the back, I don't like to tack down the Heat and Bond Light right away, because I might have to move it, because I'm going to follow my blanket stitch too, you know, when I get there. I'm going to follow, 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 and make sure that I like the way I placed it. So if you put Elmer's washable school glue in a couple spots on your on the back of your fabric, you can slide it around still, you know. Don't heat it yet, just kind of put it on there, dab it on in a couple spots, and then so it holds it down, it tacks it down somewhat, and then I I keep going on this one, and I'm meaning to go on this one here, the plus sign. But at any rate, you put it down, and it's down pretty good, you know, because of the Elmer's washable school glue. You tap it and so on. Then you follow that the same way we follow the crosshair. Use your follow buttons so that you could see that your needle, let's see, which is the first object, is this one. You want it to, you know, what it's going to do, remember, it's going to start up there, you know, because you have the jump stitch. So as you hit your follow buttons, it's going to start up there and then it's going to jump down. And when it jumps down here, that's when you know, want to make sure you're following. So I'm trying to think now. Okay, so if it ends here, that means it's starting here. Okay, so you follow, follow, follow with your needle to make sure that this part of the blanket stitch rides on the, you know, on the outside of the applique piece. Because this line here, I keep zooming in. Let me hit select. This line here is supposed to be stitching on the quilt, okay? Then it jumps in to stitch on the applique fabric. So that's why you still follow this to make sure that you placed your applique on correctly. You know, if you didn't, you could slide it around. If you've slid it around and did your following and it still isn't right, you may say to yourself, shoot, did I cut my applique fabric too big? It's never going to fit. Did I cut my applique fabric too small and it's never going to look right? That's when you know you made your expand on the cut file. You made it wrong. And that's how I figured out I made mine too big. I expanded my cut file too big. You know, I should have just did 1 mil in Studio. So that's how you kind of figure things out. So it's kind of picky, but after you do it a couple times, you get used to it and you get into a rhythm and you understand what you're doing. So once you've followed it and it's correct, and you know, you see that it looks straight all the way around, you follow it here, you follow it on, you know, all the way around if you want, then you can take your iron and tack it down. You know, that means the heat and bond light is going to take effect. Okay, so not only the Elmer's washable, but the heat and bond light is going to take effect. You don't have to tack it down fully, you know, because you don't want to disturb it too much, I guess. And I have one of those little irons, but you can tack it down, you know, in a couple of strategic spots, maybe here, here, and there, and, you know, just tap, 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 and so on. And then once it's down, then go ahead and stitch it. Stitch your blanket stitch. You know, you got to get back to the beginning of it because we did all that following. So, and you don't have to worry about pulling up threads or anything because we have these jump berry lines. They take care of everything. There's no ties on them. It's all done. So there's no stress then at the machine. Okay. So you go ahead, you stitch your blanket stitch, use your plastic purple thingy, you know, to hold it down or whatever if you need to. And then when that gets done, you just let it stop. And you want to pull up your jump threads because you got to get them out of the way for the next one. And if you can, go ahead and try and bury them. So use your slotted needle, and I have lots of videos showing how I bury these long threads. Or you could just try and keep them out of the way with tape, you know. But you're going to have to undo them, each of the two that we just did, the beginning one and the ending one, and get them out of the way for the next object. So I would say before you take them out, take out the placement stitches first, because then these won't be flopping around. So first remove the placement stitches, you know, around this plus sign. Those should be easy to come out. And you know, if you're on a quilt, that quilt's going to be big probably, so it's going to be hard to get under them. So you're probably going to have to cut them from on top. And I know that's kind of hard to do, because usually the bottom ones are the easier ones to get out. But here's the thing, since you're quilting in the hoop, you set your tensions quite a bit differently. And I have lots of videos on that as well. So basically what I do is my bobbin tension is so low because multi-needles are meant to pull to the bottom. When my bobbin is normally at, say, 20 grams or 18 grams, something like that, which is 200 millinewtons or 18 millinewtons approximately on a TOA gauge, normally for normal embroidery. But for quilting in the hoop, it's not 20 grams, it's 10 grams or 100 millinewtons. It's really low because you remember, you're going to see your bobbin stitches on the back of the quilt. You want the top and the bobbin to meet in the center. So my bobbin is set to like 10 grams or 100 millinewtons, depending on how you set your TOA or what TOA you have, the digital or the manual. And then the top is cranked up really high. Like my top is cranked up all the way to 9. Really tight. And then I even think I double wrap. Oh yeah, I double wrap my pretensioner. Okay. So on the top, I use Bro thread. Okay, it's not made by Brother. It is like a Chinese company, I believe. Bro thread. You can get them on Amazon. It's 100% cotton, and it's a 30 weight. Okay, so it's thick. It's thicker than 40 weight embroidery thread, and it's cotton. Why do I use cotton? Because it doesn't stretch. I have found that when I use polyester, it stretches, and I don't get the meeting in the middle. That's just been my experience. It might be different for you and your machine. So I use Bro thread 30 weight on the top, and in the bobbin I use So Fine. Okay, that's by Superior Threads, I believe, makes it. And it's SO space FINE, So Fine. And that's 50 weight polyester. So it's okay for the bobbin to be stretchy. We kind of want the bobbin to be stretchy because then I could pull it up and get it to meet in the middle in the batting. You know, meet the top in the middle there in the batting. When I say middle, I mean the batting. Okay. And I already told you my bobbin tension is at 10 grams. My pretensioner is double wrapped. And it's weird. I even I put a piece of batting around the first guide before my first guide on my machine just to add more tension. And I use a size 14 needle. Okay. Because I'm using 30 weight thread, I use a 14 needle. So I don't even use the 11 needle. I use a 14 sharp. That way you don't, you make a big enough hole, the threads can slide in and out. You're not going to have any, catching or I mean, I'm sorry, skip stitches or anything like that. You know, everything will be good. So that's what I use for my thread and so on. So anyway, so you've stitched the first one. Once it's done stitching, take out your placement stitches, and you'll have to take them out from the top, like I said, and then try to, like, you know, before you take out all the top, try to grab that bobbin thread so you'll pull it up in one long, you know, spiel, that bobbin thread that's underneath. You'll figure it out how to get your own system for that. And then once your placement stitches are taken out, then you can deal with these jump berry threads, whether you want to bury them at this time or you just want to keep them out of the way, because you worry that, you know, you're going to disturb the hoop. But remember, you probably won't disturb it too much, because, you know, each time we do a placement stitch, we're doing it new and fresh, and it's not going to be off by that much. And if it is, you could just pull them out because they're just basting stitch, you know, there's no ties or anything on them. But so then once you're done with those two items, you know, the placement and the jump berry threads, then you'll just move on to your next placement stitch, and you'd repeat, you know, over again, over and over, all the way down. And that's it. So I know it's a lot of explaining, and to be honest, this has been a long series, quite long. So I encourage you to look at some of my YouTube videos, like the playlist for the quilt and the hoop, to get more in depth. And you can always ask me questions if you attempt something like this. I don't think anybody would attempt a design this complex right off the bat, because this whole, you know, process of working with a blanket stitch as opposed to a satin stitch applique, it's harder. It is harder to get the blanket stitch to look perfect. But if you follow, you will get it perfect. You will. And like I said, you can always call me. We can do a video chat, and, you know, the whole 9 yards. Okay? All right, guys. So let me just do a Control A and at least get the whole thing into view here. And I'll go ahead and hide everything but the blanket stitch, just for one final look. Okay, oops. Oh, I can't because all my jump berries are showing, but that's okay. You get the idea. So, all right, guys. Finally done with this 3-part series. I'm so happy that it's done, because this is not an easy task, to be honest. This was quite involved. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye.